Cuba begins a long farewell to former President Fidel Castro. U.S. President-elect Donald Trump alleges voter fraud in the election he won earlier this month. And a Nigerian model comes out on top at a prestigious international competition. Africa 54 starts right now.
Good evening. This is Africa 54. I'm Haiti Adams-Fitzpatrick, in for Vincent Makori this evening. Thank you for joining us. We are following that big news that broke over the weekend, the death of Cuba's Fidel Castro. Flags are flying at half-staff across Cuba as the island nation enters a week of memorials to mark Castro's passing. Castro, who had long been ill, died late Friday at the age of 90. A series of memorials have begun, with Cubans gathering in Havana's iconic Revolution Square. On Wednesday, Castro's ashes will be carried eastward across the country. It will be a three-day procession that follows in reverse the route taken by the then young revolutionary and his rebel fighters as they advanced on Havana from the Sierra Maestra Mountains before taking power in January 1959. Castro will be buried December 4th in the southeastern city of Santiago de Cuba. And while there is much focus on Castro's record in Cuba, the perspective is quite different in Africa, where Castro is considered a liberation icon. Tributes have been pouring in from around the continent. Castro sent thousands of Cuban troops to fight on Cold War battlefields in Angola, Mozambique, and Ethiopia. He helped change the course of history in southern Africa, playing a critical role in helping struggle activists there break the back of the apartheid regime and forcing South Africa's white minority government to set Namibia free. Joining us via Skype to discuss Castro's legacy in southern Africa is Professor Piero Gleesis. He teaches American foreign policy at Johns Hopkins University. Professor, hello, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Here is this revolutionary from the Caribbean coming to the aid of Africans, sending troops and medical personnel. What was Castro's motivation for what he did in Africa, and what did he really accomplish?
Well, I think his motivation was summed up very well by Kissinger in the last volume of his memoirs, when he said that Castro was arguably the most genuine revolutionary leader then in power. He was talking about the Cuban intervention in Angola in 1975. What you had in Angola in 1975, the country was scheduled for independence in November 1975. A civil war began. On one side, the MPLA, which had close ties with communist countries. On the other, two other movements. Even U.S. officials who distrusted the communist proclivities of the MPLA noted that it acknowledged it was head and shoulders above the other two movements that were led by corrupt and unprincipled men. The MPLA was winning the civil war, and because of this, in October 1975, urged by the United States, South Africa invaded Angola with the idea of installing the other movements in power, which had pledged their friendship to Pretoria. And when the South African troops intervened, they crushed the resistance of the MPLA. And they would have taken Angola if Fidel Castro had not sent his soldiers. And the Cuban soldiers stopped the South African advance and then pushed them back towards Namibia, which was ruled by South Africa, south of Angola. And this was the first great contribution of Cuba to Southern Africa, a victory of what we could call, in terms of what was happening, the axis of evil. Washington, Pretoria, would have strengthened the grip of apartheid over the people of Southern Africa, because the South African would have installed the client regime in Luanda. And I think that was the reason why Fidel Castro intervened. The struggle against apartheid, what he called the most beautiful cause of mankind. And again, it is interesting that Kissinger himself came to this conclusion, This was the key motivation.
Very briefly, Professor, on balance, do you think Castro's impact in Africa will be a footnote or really a major chapter in the way history remembers him over the years and generations? We have very little time left.
In the United States, will be a footnote because Americans like to distort history. In Africa, will be a huge chapter.
Professor Piero Gleesis from Johns Hopkins University, thank you very much for speaking to us about the legacy of Fidel Castro in Africa. Well, in Cuba, many see Fidel Castro's death as an opportunity for change in the country's decades-long history of human rights abuse. But as VOA's Catherine Gibson reports, those changes might not come easily.
Celebration in the streets of Little Havana. Cuban Americans hoping the death of one man can end decades of human rights abuses.
That a bad dictator that had Cuba under oppression and repression for almost 6 decades is no longer with us, and that will give an opportunity to the Cuban people to start the journey towards freedom and democracy.
Under Castro's rule, 3 generations of Cuban people lacked nearly all basic civil and political freedoms, with thousands of dissenters punished or imprisoned. Even the restoration of relations with the U.S. starting in 2014 didn't loosen the limitations on freedoms. The internet still severely censored, and the detention of journalists and human rights defenders stepped up. Now it will be up to Raul Castro, who has gradually taken over control of the communist island nation, to decide if his brother's death marks the end of an era, Professor Guadalupe Correa told VOA via Skype.
He needs to change his approach to his own country and allow the country to be more open.
A hope echoed by many U.S. lawmakers taking to Twitter in the hours after Castro's death.
This represents an opportunity, especially for those freedom fighters in Cuba, the opposition leaders who have been risking their lives, their security, their well-being for years to fight for a better country. Now they're going to be stronger.
But change in the wake of Castro's death could come at a steep cost, foreign policy analyst Brian Fonseca told VOA via Skype.
Given that preservation of power is the most critical thing to the Cuban political elite, then I think that you may find repression going up, at least in the short term.
And back in the streets of Little Havana, the realization that the end of the era of Castro is in many ways just the beginning.
The people of Cuba do not have a free elections. There's no democracy, and I think those of us aren't going to rest until we see the freedom for the people of Cuba.
Catherine Gibson in Washington, VOA News.
Well, U.S. President Barack Obama gave a diplomatic reaction to Castro's death. He hailed the opening of U.S. ties with Cuba after 50 years of hostility and expressed condolences to Castro's family. But President-elect Donald Trump has criticized Obama's Cuba policies. In a statement, he called Castro, quote, a brutal dictator. And those differences in tone could signal another major shift in relations between Washington and Havana. VOA's White House correspondent Cindy Sain reports.
President Obama considers opening up U.S. ties to Cuba after more than 50 years of bitter estrangement, one of his signature foreign policy achievements. He visited the Caribbean island nation in March, the first sitting U.S. president to do so since 1928.
I have come here to bury the last remnant of the Cold War in the Americas.
The two countries have reopened their embassies after more than 50 years. U.S. cruise ships are now docking in Cuba, and there are regular flights by U.S. airlines to the island. But the death of 90-year-old Fidel Castro and the election of Republican Donald Trump are raising questions about what will happen to the warming of U.S.-Cuban ties. A senior Trump advisor, Kellyanne Conway, told ABC News this week that Trump is open to any number of possibilities on resetting U.S. relations with Cuba, but that he will demand concessions in return.
We remain very firm that when you open up diplomatic relations, as President Obama has with Cuba and Fidel Castro in the last several years, that to get nothing in return, including political prisoners and assurances that people on the island of Cuba will be free politically and economically. I mean, I've personally met, I'm sure you have, victims of Fidel Castro's oppression and his torture and his imprisonment.
Obama's shift in policy toward Havana also has been criticized by a number of lawmakers from both major parties, including Senator Ted Cruz, whose father is from Cuba.
I very much hope that we don't see any U.S. government officials going to Fidel Castro's funeral. I hope we don't see Barack Obama and Joe Biden and Hillary Clinton and Democrats lining up to lionize a murderous tyrant and thug.
The White House has not announced who will be traveling to Fidel Castro's funeral on December 4th. Although future U.S. policy toward Havana is uncertain, Trump likely would agree with Obama's statement that the Cuban people must know they have a friend and partner in the United States. Cindy Sain, VOA News, the White House.
In news from East Africa, more than 40 royal guards have been killed in fighting that erupted in the kingdom of Rwenzururu in the Kasese region. The guards died in an exchange of fire with Uganda's army. The violence stems from a long-running conflict between Ugandan security forces and rebels loyal to tribal King Charles Wesley Mumbere. It came after rebels refused to give Mumbere up to Ugandan officials and royal guards tried to intervene. Police say 139 royal guards were arrested and are being detained. Several items were seized at the palace, including 16 petrol bombs, 42 knives, 3 metal detectors, a rifle, a pistol and 47 pangas. Mumbere is the king of Uganda's Bakonzo people, some of whom have called for secession from Uganda. Moving to the DRC, where an ethnic Nande militia has killed more than 30 people, mostly Hutus, in the worst flaring of ethnic tensions in the region in more than a year. About 200 people were wounded. Ethnic rivalries, incursions and competition for mineral-rich land have stoked conflict for 2 decades now among eastern Congo's armed groups, including the Mai Mai. That's the self-defense militias created to resist Rwandan invasions. Militias claiming to represent the 2 ethnic groups have engaged in tit-for-tat violence throughout the year, killing dozens of civilians. It's been more than 20 years since the brutal genocide took place in Rwanda, and the International Criminal Tribunal for Rwanda has prosecuted dozens of alleged massacre leaders. The court officially closed last year, but the United Nations has now opened a new facility in Tanzania that will be home to the tribunal's archives. It will also house a courtroom for future cases. For VOA, Willie Lowry has the story from Arusha.
Perched on a hilltop in the shadow of an active volcano, the United Nations Mechanism for International Criminal Tribunals in Arusha is a state-of-the-art facility. It's the first of its kind, built by the UN.
We are very much hoping that this will become an extremely important symbol of international criminal justice, not only in Tanzania, but the whole of East Africa, indeed, for the whole Africa.
While the Tribunal for Rwanda has officially wrapped up its business, the UN remains committed to tracking down and prosecuting the remaining fugitives, something that will be done in this building.
We also have 3 fugitives, very senior people, who are charged with very critical involvement in genocide in Rwanda.
The $8 million facility will also be home to a library and to the tribunal's archives, including court transcripts, videos, and evidence used in the trials.
We have to have a dedicated building with controlled humidity, controlled temperature, weight, strength of construction which would support the heavy weight of the archives.
The UN contracted a local construction company to build the facility on land donated by the government of Tanzania. The energy-efficient buildings are made from Tanzanian materials, including Tanga stone.
I am aware that people from across the country have been employed to make this project a success. It is heartening that these employees were both men and women, from engineers, technicians, 4 men, and so I can say 4 women, to supporting staff.
Tanzanian officials hope the facility will help cement Arusha's place as an international destination and make it a hub for diplomacy and human rights in the region.
Arusha is indeed going to be the citadel of international peace and justice in Africa and in the world.
To that end, the government has donated land nearby to the African Court of Human and People's Rights and to several other international bodies. Willie Lowry for VOA News, Arusha, Tanzania.
And we want to know what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we cover here. Join the conversation on Facebook. The address there is Africa 54, and you can check out our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. Coming up, Donald Trump again cries allegations of voter fraud. Stay with us.
This is Greenbeat for a healthier planet.
In the heart of the Amazon rainforest, rising high above the green canopy, is the Amazonian Tall Tower Observatory, or ATO for short. The tower is designed to measure the complex exchange of gases such as carbon dioxide, methane, and ozone between the ground and the sky. Project Director Antonio Monzi says the tower's soaring height will also allow researchers to study the formation of clouds and rain.
The temperature of the planet that has been increasing and has increased here changes in the rainy seasons here. All those changes have an impact on the ecosystems.
The tower is a joint project between Brazil and Germany, with both nations sharing in the estimated $10 million price tag. The ATO should become fully operational sometime in 2017. For Greenbeat, I'm Doug Bernard.
U.S. President-elect Donald Trump has renewed allegations of voter fraud in the election he won earlier this month. But he's not providing any evidence to back his claim. Trump said on Twitter that in addition to winning the Electoral College in a landslide, he would have defeated Democrat Hillary Clinton in the nationwide popular vote if, quote, you deduct the millions of people who voted illegally. 4 hours later, he called into question the results in Virginia, New Hampshire and California, the states he lost to Clinton on November 8th. Trump also blasted efforts by Green Party candidate Jill Stein to call for a recount of the vote in the state of Wisconsin, which Trump narrowly won. The Clinton campaign says it will participate in those recount efforts. During the election campaign, Trump regularly suggested the election process was rigged, but never provided proof to back up his claims.
It's a rigged election, believe me. And we know it's a rigged system.
1.8 million dead people are registered to vote.
Well, Clinton's election lawyer Mark Elias commented on Twitter Sunday that after the criticism from Trump, quote, we are getting attacked for participating in a recount that we did not ask for by the man who won the election but thinks there was massive fraud. Any recount in Wisconsin or Pennsylvania and Michigan, where Stein also wants authorities to look at the votes, is unlikely to affect the outcome of the election. Trump will take office in January because he won a majority under the Electoral College system used to choose presidents in the United States. That's despite trailing in the total popular vote by about 2 million. Meanwhile, Americans are waiting to see who Trump picks next for his cabinet. As VOA's Michael Bowman reports, the pace of announcements slowed over the Thanksgiving holiday, but is expected to pick up again this week.
No Trump selection is generating more intrigue than Secretary of State. In the running to be nominated as America's top diplomat is a stalwart Trump loyalist.
I would never discuss politics and what he selects and doesn't select on Thanksgiving, and I'd probably never discuss it at all.
As well as one of his fiercest critics during the campaign.
Think of Donald Trump's personal qualities: the bullying, the greed, the showing off, the misogyny, the absurd third-grade theatrics.
Some closest to Trump are loudly and publicly making clear their discomfort with Romney.
this is Trump's party now, and he won states that Mitt Romney lost. I mean, he won Michigan, Mitt Romney lost it by 10. I only wish Governor Romney had been as critical of Hillary Clinton.
One of Trump's former rivals says he is reassured by the team the president-elect is assembling so far.
I'm encouraged by the team that is coming together, by where their focus is. I'm encouraged by their plan for the first 100 days to act aggressively, lifting the burdens on small businesses and job creators. That's what the president should be doing.
Cruz says Republicans must not be timid in pushing their agenda after Inauguration Day.
We have a mandate for change, and Republicans have been given the opportunity. We've been given control of the White House, of every executive branch, and both houses of Congress. We can't blow it. We have got to deliver.
Progressives, meanwhile, are urging Trump to stand firm in areas where, during the campaign, he said he disagrees with Republican Party orthodoxy, such as preserving America's safety net for the elderly and the poor.
Trump said when he was running for president, you heard him say this, I am the only Republican candidate who will not cut Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. Well, you got some people in the Republican Party right now who want to voucherize Medicare, make massive cuts in Medicaid. Will he keep his word?
While Trump is expected to complete his cabinet picks in coming weeks, hundreds of lower-level nominations will be made after he is sworn in on January 20th. Michael Bowman, VOA News, Washington.
In Africa, it has been almost 3 years since the start of the Ebola epidemic in West Africa. It killed more than 11,000 people and laid bare the weaknesses of the region's public health systems. No new Ebola cases have been reported since March, but the three most affected countries remain on alert. VOA traveled along the path of the outbreak to find out what has changed and how the region might cope if the virus starts spreading again. Ricky Shryock has the story from the Kenema Government Hospital in eastern Sierra Leone.
Less than a third of the 400 nurses working at the Kenema Government Hospital are paid. Ada Makala says she was promised she would be put on salary after she spent 2015 working at an Ebola treatment unit, or ETU.
Up to date, they have not yet enrolled us. I'm still not paid. I'm not feeling good. I'm feeling bad. I'm just thinking that if I lose my life during the time, so that is all my children are going to suffer just like that. So I regret it to work at the Ebola Center.
And that is the concern here, that if another health emergency strikes, volunteer nurses may not answer the call again. This hospital in Kenema was the first place Ebola appeared in Sierra Leone. Some of the nurses who treated Ebola patients got hazard pay, but after the ETUs closed, many had to go back to being unpaid volunteers.
We are not denying that it may not have negative impacts. If we have too many volunteers, that may have to slow down the work. There may be sometimes people will be demotivated. It could even contribute to the other workers who have been paid to be demotivated.
Dozens of healthcare workers at the Kenema Hospital got Ebola, likely while caring for patients. 40 of them died, including revered virologist Dr. Sheikh Umar Khan. The health ministry says it is working with the World Bank to give the family of each health worker who died $5,000, though no money has been dispersed yet.
Until now, I'm not feeling happy. At any time when I remember Dr. Khan and my colleague, the tears run my eyes. It was not easy.
Fatimata Cisse says she got Ebola treating a fellow nurse who had the virus. At the time, she was wearing protective gear designed for Lassa fever patients, not Ebola. But that was all the hospital had. The nurses say one improvement since the epidemic has been the training on infection prevention and control, known as IPC.
It's because the IPC have made us to know that we are risking our life before Ebola. We are, even if it is not Ebola patient, but we have another disease that will affect us.
Cholera, hepatitis, Lassa fever, there are quite a few infectious diseases that could show up at this hospital. And the nurses say at the very least they are better prepared, though they would like to be paid. Ricky Shryock for VOA News in Kenema, Sierra Leone.
And it's time now for a short break. Still to come here on Africa 54, we'll show you how this Nigerian model made history at a prestigious international competition. We'll be right back.
you've just joined us, I'm Mariama Diallo, and here is a quick recap of today's headlines. In the Gambia, rights activist and prominent opposition coalition figure Dr. Aissatou Touré is optimistic about her coalition achieving victory in Thursday's presidential election. In Zimbabwe, the government launches a new currency that authorities hope will ease a severe cash crunch, but critics fear the move will erase their savings. In Ghana, the promise of prosperity leads thousands of young people in Accra to make a living through online dating scams. In Kenya, a controversial railway over a wildlife park in Kenya's capital, Nairobi, has divided conservationists. That's all for today. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.
You're with Africa 54. Welcome back. Let's take a look at what is trending. It's another day and another way to use virtual reality. At the Royal Academy in London, artists are demonstrating the possibilities of painting and sculpture in a VR studio. This is a preview of the Royal Academy's upcoming virtual reality exhibition in January 2017. The artists who will take part are still trying to master VR painting. The Royal Academy's project aims to showcase the potential of virtual reality transcending traditional materials like oil paint and canvases. The artists will use two programs to create their works: Tilt Brush and Condon, a 3D modeling app. Well, we learn something every day. And there's more virtual reality news, this time from South Korea. Here at Seoul's VR Plus Cafe, visitors don these virtual reality headsets, then strap themselves in for the ride. Though it's easily accessible in some countries, tech fans in South Korea have had a difficulty accessing virtual reality technology. According to director Ken Hwang, an average of about 120 people visit the cafe during the week, and around 250 to 300 people drop by on weekends. A leading South Korea VR content developer is hoping mobile virtual reality technology will help push the industry's growth as a whole. And finally, what happens when a top modeling agency holds a competition for the next top models? Well, Nigeria's Davidson Obenebo is named the winner in the men's category of the International Elite Model Search. Davidson is the first model of color to win the competition. He will receive a contract worth 50,000 euros. For the other top winners, the contracts are guaranteed at 50,000 euros minimum for girls and 20,000 euros minimum for the boys. Elite is known for discovering the launching the careers of some of the most famous models in the world, including Cindy Crawford and Giselle Bundchen. And that is what's trending today. Way to go, Davidson. And that is our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. For more news, tune into VOA's evening radio show, Africa News Tonight, at 1800 UTC. And in the mornings to Daybreak Africa between 0300 and 0600 UTC, Monday through Friday. Thank you so much for being with us. And from all of us here in Washington, it's a very good night.
I'm Michelle Joseph for Anglais Télé. This is VOA. Follow us at La Voix de l'Amérique. Go to lavoixdelamerique.com.
Welcome to English in a Minute. A lot of idioms in American English come from sports. Here's one that comes from baseball.
Keep your eye on the ball.
Let's learn how to use this expression when not talking about sports.
Hey, Jonathan, how is your Arabic class going?
It's going okay. I'm not studying as much as I should be.
Jonathan, you had better keep your eye on the ball if you want to win that scholarship to study in Egypt. Study harder.
I know. You're right.
To keep your eye on the ball means to keep your attention on something important to you, usually to reach a goal. This idiom can be used in all situations. In our example, Anna tells Jonathan he needs to keep his eye on the ball if he wants to get a scholarship. And that's English in a Minute.